So can you guarantee that the UK is going to leave the EU by the 31st of October?
Yes, that's our determined policy. We know that the European Union want us to leave. We know that we have a deal that allows us to leave. And listening to Labour MPs like Lucy, who very honourably want to make sure that the referendum mandate is fulfilled, there is now an opportunity with a good deal. And people, just a few weeks ago, were saying that it would be impossible for the Prime Minister to get this deal.
Well, Number 10 was saying that.
Well, one of the things that the Prime Minister has shown is that determined and focused negotiation can ensure that we honour the referendum mandate. And people were saying the withdrawal agreement couldn't be reopened. It has been. People were saying that the backstop couldn't be ditched. It has been. People were saying that we wouldn't be able to get the United Kingdom whole and entire to leave the European Union. It's there, and I hope that in the days ahead, MPs like my friend Amber Rudd and Lucy Powell, who've indicated that they want to get Brexit done, will ensure that we do so in a timely and orderly way.
I couldn't help but notice when I asked if you can guarantee that we're going to leave at the end of October, you said that's our determined policy, which I kind of feel is a little bit different.
No, we are going to leave by October the 31st. We have the means and the ability to do so. And people who, you know, yesterday we had some people who voted for delay, voted explicitly to try to frustrate this process and to drag it out. I think, actually, the mood in the country is clear and the Prime Minister's determination is absolute, and I am with him in this. We must leave by October 31st.
But you sent a letter, and I know that you can say that you sent other letters as well, that the Prime Minister didn't sign it, that it was a photocopy or whatever, but you have still sent a letter requesting an extension to the EU. So how can you sit here and say that you can guarantee that we're going to leave by the 31st? I don't understand.
That letter was sent because Parliament required it to be sent. But as David Davis pointed out earlier, Parliament can insist that a letter is sent, but Parliament can't change the Prime Minister's mind. Parliament can't change the government's policy or determination. And the Prime Minister is very clear. And for that matter, so are European Union leaders. They want this done. And we, I think, as a Parliament, we had an opportunity yesterday to send a determined signal collectively that we wanted it done. We now have an opportunity in the days ahead to pass the legislation necessary in order to ensure that we honour the referendum mandate and leave.
So have you had assurances then from EU leaders that they are going to veto an extension?
Well, I'm not going to talk about conversations that may or may not have been had with EU leaders, but...
You're not going to say that didn't happen either.
But I think it would be wrong for people to assume, as some do, that EU leaders want this to drag out. Emmanuel Macron, Leo Varadkar and others have said they want this done by the 31st of October. There's no profit in delay for anyone. The European Union wants to move on. It wants to make sure that we can have the next stage of our relationship develop. And also, there's no one in this country who thinks, do you know what? The last 3.5 years, I want that division and I want that uncertainty to persist. We need to get this done.
So I'm just trying to pin down what's going to be happening. So when are you expecting a response from the EU?
Well, I think the first thing is the EU are waiting to see what Parliament does now. So I think that there were many in Europe who were disappointed that Parliament didn't vote clearly yesterday in a meaningful vote to leave. We'll have an opportunity in the days ahead to consider the legislation that allows us to leave the European Union. If people vote for that legislation, as Amber Rudd suggested that she would earlier, and as Lucy and many other Labour MPs may well do, then we can leave, and we can leave in time. So,
just to be clear, if in the coming days Parliament votes to approve the deal, does that mean the letter is withdrawn?
Yes, if we vote to leave, if we get the legislation through, then there is no extension. October the 31st is within sight.
Is that all of the legislation, or is that just the meaningful vote that many expect is going to be happening tomorrow? It's
the legislation. Well, the critical thing is we're introducing this legislation. Parliament can get it done. Parliament showed at times in the past that when it is resolved and when it is ready to respect a particular mandate, that it can get the law through. And that is what people expect. So I had the opportunity to talk to many of my constituents after the vote yesterday. They were in a mixture of despair and confusion that Parliament, which had said, look, we'd prefer a deal to no deal, when presented with a very good deal, the Parliament voted for more delay. Now, I know that some of those who voted for delay yesterday, I hope that they will vote for the deal
and
next
Amber
week,
Rudd
and we
said
can leave.
she wasn't voting for delay. She says that she was voting as an insurance policy because effectively she doesn't trust other people in Parliament to try and put no deal back on the table, which is what she's worried about.
I understand and respect and admire Amber, but I think the most important thing that all of us can do now is to focus on getting the legislation through, because I think it's also important to recognise that as a result of yesterday's vote, the risk of leaving without a deal has grown. If we'd had our victory yesterday, would have been on a clear flight path towards a deal. Now, as a result of that vote, we can't guarantee that any extension will be granted, and therefore it's my responsibility, my departmental, my constitutional responsibility to prepare for all eventualities. The risk of leaving without a deal has actually increased because we cannot guarantee that the European Council will grant an extension, and that is why I will later today be chairing a Cabinet Committee meeting, extraordinarily on a Sunday, in order to ensure that the next stage of our exit preparations and our preparedness for no deal is accelerated.
And what does that mean in real terms?
It means that we're triggering Operation Yellowhammer. It means that we are preparing to ensure that if no extension is granted, and we cannot guarantee that an extension will be granted, that we have done everything possible in order to prepare to leave without a deal. And that's why it's so urgent. Parliamentarians have a choice now. There is a sure thing in front of us, and that is the Prime Minister's deal that honours the referendum mandate. And if people vote for it, then we can leave, and we can leave in an orderly way. But if they don't vote for that deal, then the risk is that the European Council will say, that's it. We're not interested in delay. You have decided not to back the deal that we've backed and that we say is a good deal. I'm afraid that's it.
Do you think you have the numbers to get it through?
I believe we do, yes. I think that one of the interesting things about yesterday is that, as I said, I didn't agree with Oliver Letwin's amendment. I wish it hadn't been passed. But there are people whom I like and admire, like Amber, who voted for it.
I love it, the love bombing of the people who you need is continuing.
Well, she's an old friend, as is Oliver. And, people can disagree. This is an issue which raises, understandable passions on every side. But I'm hopeful that a number of people, like Amber, who voted for Oliver Letwin's amendment, will vote for the deal. Oliver himself has said that it's a really good deal and he wants to have the chance to vote for it.
Are you at all worried that the Speaker may not allow you to bring meaningful vote forward?
Well, these decisions for the Speaker, but one thing that no MP can do is to prevent the legislation coming forward which will allow MPs to vote on the bill which will become an act which will take us out of the European Union.
And what happens if they don't back it?
Well, if they don't back it, as I say, there's a real danger that we will leave without a deal. If we do not back this deal, then the risk that we assess and which I have to take incredibly seriously, advised by civil servants, is that if we do not back this deal, then the risk is that the European Council may not grant an extension. We cannot bet on that. It is not a sure thing, and therefore we have to be ready for every eventuality, and that is why I hope, because my strong preference is for us to leave with a deal, that MPs will support the Prime Minister.
You have been quite critical about the Letwin amendment, but I just wonder if part of the feeling that many MPs have is they simply haven't had time to probably look at some incredibly important changes that you want to make to the future of the country. I mean, this is it here. It is a hefty document. It is 535 pages long. Is it not right that MPs should have a bit more time to digest it, to read it? Otherwise, you're basically asking them just to trust you.
We've had 3.5 years since the referendum, with debates about Brexit, with different models being assessed.
They've had 3.5 days to get to grips with the latest changes.
The key changes, I think almost everyone in Parliament is aware of, or certainly should be aware of now. The key changes are this, that we've ditched the backstop, that we've allowed the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland, to leave the customs union and to be one customs territory. And it's also the case that in the political declaration, we've made it clear that our ambition, and this will be the next stage of our work with the EU, is to get a comprehensive, top-class free trade agreement. But it's also clear that we will protect workers' rights and protect the environment. It's a good deal. It's clear from what Oliver Letwin, Amber Rudd and others have said that they've had a chance to look at this deal, to assess it and to say, let's back it. I think that when people say we need more time, in many cases what they're trying to do is what some in Parliament have tried to do throughout, which is to use delay as a way of trying to overturn the referendum mandate.
Now, we're talking about the detail of the deal here, and I am keen to talk about what's in the actual deal, in particular in relation to the Union and Northern Ireland, because the DUP have some genuine and deeply held concerns about undermining the integrity of the Union going forward. We can just have a look at what Sammy Wilson said in the House of Commons yesterday. Now, he's the DUP's Brexit spokesperson. He said that Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland alone will be left in the clutches of the European Union. And then he goes on to say about the details of the deal, if anyone tells me that does not represent an economic, customs, legal border, hard border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, I don't know what a hard border looks like then. Can you understand why there are these deeply held concerns and passions from unionists?
Yes, I can. I've worked with Sammy in the past. We were colleagues on the Brexit Select Committee together, and there are people who are DUP MPs who are friends of mine, and I'm a very strong supporter of the union of our four nations. So I completely understand how seriously my friends and colleagues in the DUP take it.
They feel you've sold them out.
I think that the important thing, I believe, to recognise is that there is no change, none, in the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. It is the case that we leave as one united kingdom,
but there are changes
and we will be
in
one customs territory.
Aren't there? I mean, you can talk about the constitutional realities, but in practical changes, there are some considerable practical differences between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom.
Well, there are some specific proposals that are in place which, A, make sure that we can safeguard the gains of the peace process by ensuring that there is no infrastructure at or near the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. And it is also the case that we can ensure that businesses in Northern Ireland have unimpeded access to both the UK and to Ireland. So business organisations in Northern Ireland have welcomed this deal. They believe that it's in the interests of the jobs and workers of Northern Ireland. And I think that with goodwill, we can make these arrangements work in a way which gives Northern Ireland a strong economic underpinning, and the strength of Northern Ireland's economy, the stability of people's jobs and futures can help to underpin the union, because the union ultimately is built on stability and a shared sense that we're all in this together. And one of the things that I know the Prime Minister and I want to do is to show that we're reinforcing the union at every level, and that we're making not just the investment in financial terms, but the investment in emotional terms to ensure that people in Northern Ireland, like people in Scotland and Wales, recognise that we are one UK stronger together.
Well, I want to look at what the Prime Minister himself has said on this previously, himself at the DUP conference last year. This is how Boris Johnson, if you like, defined what the union would be. He said, we would be damaging the fabric of the union with regulatory checks and even customs controls between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. No British Conservative government could or should sign up to anything of the kind. Under this plan, there will be regulatory checks, there will be customs checks in the Irish Sea. And the Prime Minister himself has defined that as damaging the fabric of the union.
The Prime Minister was talking about past proposals. We have new proposals. One of the key things...
He's talking about checks and customs checks in the Irish Sea.
In my previous
job, this deal.
In my previous job, I was Environment Secretary, and one of the things as Environment Secretary that I was very well aware of is that there are already regulatory checks. As my friend and colleague David Davis pointed out earlier, the Reverend Dean Paisley, when he was leader of the DUP, used to say, my people are British, but my cows are Irish. And by that he meant that the whole island of Ireland was what scientists call a single epidemiological zone. In other words, there are checks when live animals move from Scotland or from Liverpool to Northern Ireland. There are already checks that we need to manage, but the key question, if you take one step back, is Northern Ireland in the customs territory the same customs territory as the rest of the UK? Absolutely. Is it outside the customs union of the EU? Absolutely.
Okay.
And finally, the other thing is, this deal is underpinned by the principle of consent. It cannot be the case that Northern Ireland can be kept in any arrangement against its will.
OK, now, John Barron, one of the Leave voters in your party, said on Friday that you and the Foreign Secretary had assured him that we could still leave with no deal at the end of the transition period next year. Is that true?
Well, we want a deal, but the alternative always, if we don't get a deal, is that a no deal is there as a real prospect.
So
and that is why
leave with no deal at the end of the transition?
The government is determined to secure a deal. And in the same way as the government and the Prime Minister were told that he couldn't secure a deal before October the 31st, in 80 days, the Prime Minister showed that he could accelerate this process.
Did you tell John Barron that,
a deal? I described it what is the constitutional position. And the constitutional position is this, that beforehand, with the backstop, it would have been the case that if we didn't conclude a deal, we would have been kept in arrangements against our will from which we could not exit. We can absolutely exit.
We could leave with no deal next year.
We do not want to leave with no deal, and it is up to MPs. No, it's only possible if MPs vote to leave with no deal, and I believe that MPs will vote for the Prime Minister's deal and for a good free trade agreement.
Does the government still want an election, and when should one be?
Well, I think we want to get Brexit done, and we've argued that actually the people need to form a verdict on this Parliament. And I think when an election comes, it will be an opportunity for people to both reflect on who's been trying to deliver Brexit and who's been seeking to thwart it, and also the people's priorities. That's a matter for the Prime Minister.
But when do you think it should be?
That is a matter for the Prime Minister. When he asks my advice, I offer it, but it's a decision for the Prime Minister and ultimately for Parliament. So
do you think it should still be before Christmas? Are you still pushing for an election at the earliest possible opportunity? Or if this deal passes, does that not hold no longer?
At the moment, my eyes are completely on getting this deal done and preparing for life outside the European Union, deal or no deal. That is my absolute top priority. And now, of course, it is the case that we need to, I believe, a strong Conservative majority in the House of Commons to ensure that the Queen's speech that we've outlined, which will mean more investment in the police, more investment in education and more investment in our NHS, gets comprehensive backing. But at the moment, the single most important thing is for all of us, whatever our views about the general election, whether we're Leavers, Remainers, Labour or Conservative, to recognise that we are Democrats first. And the British people sent us a clear instruction 3.5 years ago. And above all else, it is now time to deliver.
If you don't deliver by the 31st of October, should the Prime Minister resign?
We're going to deliver by the 31st of October. We are going to ensure that we get this deal done. And I'm confident that with the support of good people with whom we may have disagreed in the past, but who respect democracy, we will get this deal done.
If you're a betting man, would you put money in that?
Yes, I have.
You have? OK. How much?
Well, that's between me and the Health Secretary.